Hey all, welcome back. Inevitably, whenever I turn in a manuscript or get a draft out of my hands somehow, I always end up A, completely at a loss for what to do with myself, just floundering, and B, suddenly burningly inspired to dive back into old projects that I just haven't had time for. Almost exactly 2 years ago, after I finished my first draft, believe it or not, of Heir of Light, whoa, where did that time go? I found a gap, a space in time to just blitz a rough draft of this prequel project that I'd had living in my head for ever. I think I made a video about it, if I remember correctly. If I did, I'll put it up here. If I didn't, then you can just look at this corner of the screen for a second. 375 single-spaced pages in probably 4 months-ish. Probably wouldn't sound that impressive to Brandon Sanderson, but for me that was pretty speedy. And so I was pumped that I was able to accomplish that in that little gap of time, but I haven't been able to revisit it since then because then the process for Heir of Light just kind of rose up to consume everything. And now, crazily enough, we are weeks away from the release of Heir of Light. I finally have a second to look at this old project again, and I'm just kind of reeling at how fast that time went by. It's a little depressing and scary, but also I guess kind of exciting. Needless to say, I was not expecting to love what I found when I opened up this old draft again. I knew that I was kind of racing near the end and that I left a lot on the table and a lot in the margins, oh, this guy will need another whole scene, or this guy will need another few scenes, or I'll need to bridge these gaps. I really just wanted to kind of get through the key points of the story and tell myself what the story was, because I was a little bit discovery writing it. However, I was pleasantly surprised to find that there's actually a lot of good stuff there. My whole first act basically works as is. That is huge for me, guys. Can I just praise the Lord for a second? I have never been privileged enough to have an edit, not rewrite situation with anything I've written in this world. So it was really exciting and really a relief to open up this document, start reading, and realize no, this is definitely an edit situation. I don't need to just scrap it and start again. However, a strong first act can only get you so far, as I discovered when I continued reading and suddenly found myself in the climax. And it was okay, where did this come from? How did we get here? Cue the teaching moment. I have done a lot of story science videos on this channel, but I don't think I have ever talked about the importance of the midpoint, probably because I didn't understand the importance of the midpoint until now. What is a midpoint? It's not just what the name implies. It's not just a temporal marker for, a certain midsection of the story. The way that I remember it is with the word pivot. It's a place in the story, usually near the middle, where the story pivots in a new direction in some way. Whether the goal changes a little, or our perspective changes, or the plan to approach the goal changes, but it's a marked pivot near the middle of the story that gives the story a kind of second wind to head into that second half and promptly sends us into a spiral down towards disaster and chaos in the climax. For example, in the movie Tangled, which if you haven't seen it, fix it, but also be warned because I might give a spoiler. The first act, we have Rapunzel and Flynn trying to work together. They have a goal. She wants to see the floating lights. He wants to get his reward. They're working at cross purposes and it's pretty dysfunctional. Then we get to that middle section where they are put in a perilous situation and start to examine themselves, and they confess things to each other and confess true identities, etc., etc. After that point, we don't know why, because we haven't been told this explicitly, but we're no longer concerned about dysfunction in the relationship. We just recognize implicitly that we're moving forward from a new position. That's because that was the midpoint. Something shifted. The character dynamic did a pivot. Now, we're kind of approaching the goal from a new perspective and a new way of seeing the world and a new way of understanding these characters. The goal hasn't changed, but the character dynamic has changed. Another example, K-pop Demon Hunters, which will probably be my go-to example going forward because it's just a masterpiece that has literally changed my life. If you haven't seen it, apologies, but don't let me spoil it for you, maybe skip ahead. Point in the story where girls decide that they're not going to use Takedown as their fight song. I would say that that is the midpoint, because we've been trying something to accomplish the goal up to this point. It hasn't been working. Now we're sitting down, we're reevaluating who we are, what we want, and we're adjusting our plan to fit that new perspective. A shift has taken place, a pivot has taken place, we have a new plan, midpoint. I do want to say that the midpoint doesn't always necessarily mean a new plan. That is just something that I've noticed in a lot of stories, that can be the cue that the midpoint has taken place. Like, okay, now we're trying something different now going forward. And it's also what I've been using mostly when I'm trying to write a midpoint or figure out what my midpoint is going to be, is like, okay, so his plan up to this point has been to do this. How am I going to make that plan change going forward? That's just been helpful for me. But pre-Heir of Light and pre-Blood of Kings, I really did not understand what made it so important. But now that I've read this draft and seen what a story without one looks like, I get it. Without a midpoint, it feels like the story just kind of loses all shape in the middle. It stops being a story in the middle and just becomes a collection of scenes that aren't going anywhere. So part of my problem is that I have 3 POV characters that all need one, and none of them have one in this draft. The result is that it feels, one, like the climax comes completely out of nowhere. We have all this great setup, and then we have this status quo, and then it's just like, spiral, climax, oh my gosh, everything is suddenly going terribly. And there's no real sense that we arrived there by any logical momentum. It just felt like things were moseying along and then suddenly they're turning bad. And it makes the middle section feel very aimless and kind of just like dead time. That's problem number 2. When you don't have a midpoint, that whole middle chunk kind of feels like a slump. It feels like it's not heading anywhere, and it removes a sense of progress from the reader. That is one of the things that keeps a reader engaged in the story, is the sense that we are advancing towards something. Without something in the middle section of the story to remind the reader that progress is still being made, it kind of feels like we're just wandering aimlessly. Again, dead time. Even if things are happening and there are great scenes, they need to feel like they're accomplishing something as they're reading this story, that the characters are growing or developing or moving a step closer to their goal or changing the plan. That change, that pivot in the middle, gives that sense of contour and shape and direction to that middle part of the story. It's just a huge missed opportunity to not have a midpoint, I've realized, because they are just such great vehicles for character growth and introspection. I'm honestly excited that I now get to add one for all of these characters because it just opens so many doors for great scenes. So what have I learned? One, personally, I have learned that midpoints are not something that I necessarily do naturally. I can't always trust that it's gonna like organically make its way into the stuff I write. I need to make it part of my plan right from the top. Also, I've learned that stuff can be happening. That whole middle section, I mean, it's full of scenes that are fine. Like there's lots of character stuff and emotion and, you know, even some action. But without that pivot to kind of give meaning to those scenes, it kind of just feels like scenes. Needless to say, I am very excited about revisions for this project, and I actually don't mean that sarcastically. I'm genuinely very excited because I never find myself in a situation where the solution is not just to scrap things or to rewrite things, but to add things. Like I always have to just cut stuff. So it's kind of lovely to be in a place where the solution to my story problem is just to beef up that middle section with more fun scenes and more character building. My goodness, it's like Christmas. Now, when will that happen? I don't know, because I need to focus on Heir of Light right now. Let's get through one book birthday before we worry about launching into revisions for another story, shall we? Speaking of which, as of this week, the Heir of Light ebook is now available for purchase on the Sunrise website. I will put the link in the description below. The Amazon ebook release will be in a couple weeks, and then the print release on Amazon will be on September 16th. So we are like basically exactly a month out. I have lots of stuff to share with you guys in the upcoming weeks, including one cool contest opportunity, so stay tuned for that. And until then, thank you for watching this video, guys, and do not forget to spend some time in the clouds today.